Dear friends, welcome to my show. The title of the book today is Dogs of War by famous author Frederick Forsyth. The Dogs of War 1974 is a novel by Frederick Forsyth featuring a small group of European mercenary soldiers hired by a British industrialist to depose the government of the fictional African country of Zangaro. An eponymous film was also released in 1980 based on the novel directed by John Irwin. The movie was filmed in Belize in Central America. The story details a geologist's mineral discovery followed by preparations for the attack that entails soldier recruitment, training, reconnaissance and logistics of the coup d'etat, buying weapons, transport, payment. Like most of Forsyth's work, the novel is more about the protagonist's art of espionage than their characters. The mercenary protagonists are professional killers, ruthless, violent men, heroic only in the loosest sense of the word. Thus, they are anti-heroes in a way. Initially introduced as simply killers, as the novel progresses, they are gradually shown to adhere to a relatively moral mercenary code. However, as the mercenary leader, Shannon, who happens to be the main character here, tries to explain, at one point it is difficult for civilians to understand this. Friends, I have divided the narration into three parts. So the part one is the Crystal Mountain in the year 1970. The prologue shows Cat, also known as Cat Shannon, and his fellow mercenaries leaving a West African war. They have lost, saying their goodbyes to the general. Now this general is very important. This general will come towards the end of this narration. So Shannon and his fellow mercenaries leave a West African war they have lost, saying their goodbye to the general who employed them for 6 months. A few weeks later, a prospector employed by a British-based company, Manson Consolidated, sends mineral samples acquired from the Crystal Mountain in the remote hinterland of the African Republic of Zangaro to headquarters. Now, when these samples are analyzed, ruthless British mining tycoon Sir James Manson realizes that there is a huge platinum deposit in Zangaro. The president of Zangaro, Jean Kimba, is a Marxist, homicidal, insane, and under Soviet influence. So any public announcement of the findings would benefit only the Russians. Confiding only in his top assistants, security chief Simon Endine, financial expert Martin Thorpe, and Manson himself, they plan to depose Kimba and install a puppet leader who, for a pittance, will sign over Zangaro's mining rights to a shell company secretly owned by Manson. When Manson Consolidated eventually acquires the shell company for a fair market price, Sir James Manson and his aides will pocket about 60 million pounds. On the recommendation of a freelance writer, Endine hires Anglo-Irish mercenary soldier Cat Shannon to reconnoiter Zangaro and to investigate how Kimba might be deposed. After visiting the country posing as a tourist, Shannon reports that the army has little fighting abilities and values, and that Kimba has concentrated the National Armory, Treasury, and the radio station within the presidential palace in Clarence, the Zangarian capital city and principal port. If the palace is stormed and Kimba killed, there will be no opposition to any new regime. Because there is no organized dissident faction in Zangaro, the attacking force will have to be assembled outside the country and land near Clarence to launch the attack. Shannon prices the mission at £1 lakh and £10,000 for himself. Although Shannon has dealt only with Endine, who is using a false name, he has had Endine tailed by a private investigator and has discovered his true identity and his involvement with Sir James Mason. Although Mansion has taken steps to silence the few people aware of the Crystal Mountain platinum deposit, the chemist who analyzed the sample has inadvertently revealed his findings to the Soviets, who assign a KGB guard to Kimba while they prepare to send in their own geological survey team. Mansion learns from a foreign office bureaucrat that the Soviets have got wind of the deposit. He commissions Shannon to organize and mount the coup to take place on the eve of Zangaro's Independence Day, 100 days hence, although he does not tell Shannon of the Soviet involvement. Now comes part 2, the 100 days. Shannon reassembles his old team to execute the attack on Kimba's palace that includes German ex-smuggler Kurt Semmler, South African mortar expert Janny Dupree, Belgian bazooka specialist Tiny Mark Vlamink, and Corsican knife fighter Jean-Baptiste Langarotti. Semmler travels Europe looking for a suitable cargo ship to transport them and their equipment to Zangaro. Dupree remains in London to buy all their uniforms, boots, haversacks and sleeping bags. Langarotti travels to Marseille to acquire inflatable boats for the amphibious assault. Now Vlamink accompanies Shannon to Belgium to obtain 100 Schmeisser submachine guns from a former member of the SS, then remains in Belgium to prepare them to be smuggled out in oil drums. Shannon then travels to Luxembourg to establish a holding company to handle the purchase of the ship, to Spain to buy walkie-talkies, foghorns, flares and 4 lakh rounds of 9mm ammunition for Schmeissers with a forged end user certificate, and to Yugoslavia to buy bazookas, mortars and ammunition for that. Shannon also finds time for a brief sexual liaison with Julie Mansion, Sir James Mansion's daughter, from whom he learns the bare essentials of Mansion's true plans. Simultaneously, Charles Rock, one of Shannon's rival, tries to have Shannon killed since he is frustrated that Endine did not approach him for the contract despite the freelance writer recommending his name. Upon this, Langarotti tips Shannon off and they lure the assassin hired by Rocks into a trap, sending his severed head to Rocks to permanently silence him. Martin Thorpe has in the meanwhile secretly purchased the controlling share of Format Trading, a mining and plantation owning company which has long ceased trading from Lady McAllister, the ailing widow of the company's founder. His and Mansion's involvement is concealed behind the names of several fictitious shareholders. Endine has simultaneously obtained the agreement of Colonel Antony Bobby, former commander of the Zangarian army who fell out with Kimba and is now in exile, to participate in Mansion's scheme. Once installed as a president, the venal and illiterate Bobby will sign over the mineral rights of the Crystal Mountain to Bomac Trading for a nominal price, but a large bribe for himself. The mercenaries get underway after Semler acquires a nondescript cargo ship, Toscana, for the operation. Hidden in oil drums, the chemizers are smuggled across the Belgian border into France and loaded aboard the Toscana at Marseilles, along with uniforms and inflatable boats marked supposedly for water sports in Morocco. They then sail to Plos in Yugoslavia to load the mortars and rocket launchers purchased legitimately from an arms dealer, without telling the Yugoslavian authorities that they already have arms aboard. These weapons are then concealed below the deck, and the ship sails to Castilian in Spain to collect ammunition supposedly sold to the Iraqi police force. The ship then travels to Freetown in Sierra Leone to pick up 6 African mercenaries disguised as casual stevedores who will also participate in the attack, and Dr. Okoya, an African academic. Part 3. The Killing Spree. The attack on President Kimba's palace takes place as planned in the early hours of the morning. The mercenaries land on the shores of Zangaro and set up foghorns and flares to disorient the defenders and light their way through the attack. Dupree and 2 of the African mercenaries begin the assault by using mortars to bombard both nearby army camp and the interior of the palace compound, thereby eliminating the palace guard while Vlaminck destroys the compound gates with anti-tank rockets. As the bombardment ceases, Semler, Shannon, Langarotti and the other African mercenaries storm the place, with Semler shooting Kimba as he tries to escape through his bedroom window. Kimba's KGB bodyguard escapes the fight and shoots Vlaminck in the chest, but Vlaminck retaliates, killing him with his last bazooka rocket as he dies. Following the bombardment, Dupree and his 2 African mercenaries attack the nearby army camp. A Zangarian soldier throws a grenade at them as he flees, and one of the African mercenaries throws it back, but it falls short, and Dupree, deafened by the gunfire and shelling, fails to hear the warning and is accidentally killed in the blast. Around midday, Andine arrives in Clarence to install Colonel Bobby as the new Zangarian president. He has his own bodyguard, a former East End gang enforcer. When Andine and Bobby arrive at the palace, Shannon lures Bobby into a room where a shot is heard. Just as Andine realizes that Shannon has killed Bobby, Shannon then shoots Andine's bodyguard as the enforcer tries to draw his gun, and casually introduces Dr. Okoya as the new head of the government. At Shannon's request, the Soviet Geological Survey team's request to land in Zangaro is permanently refused. And now we come to the final, the aftermath. As Shannon drives Andine to the border, he explains that Andine's otherwise comprehensive research failed to note that 20,000 immigrant workers who did most of the work in Zangaro but were politically disenfranchised by the Kimba government. 100 of them in new uniforms and armed with chemizers have already been recruited as the nucleus of the new Zangarian army. When Shannon tells Andine that the coup was really conducted on behalf of a Nigerian general that I told you earlier, Andine is furious about Shannon points. Andine is furious, but Shannon points out that this government will at least be fair, and if Mansion wants the platinum, he will have to pay the proper market price, and he threatens revenge if he ever sees the mercenary in London. But Shannon is unperturbed with the warning. In the novel's epilogue, it is revealed that Dupree and Fleming were buried in simple unmarked graves near the shore. Sembler later sold the Toscana to its captain and died while on another mercenary operation in Africa. Langarotti's fate is ambiguous. The novel tells only that after he took his pay, he was last heard going to train a new group of Hutu partisans in Burundi against Michael Barrow, telling Shannon, "It's not really the money, it's never for the money." The epilogue also reveals that before embarking on the Zangaro operation, Shannon was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, skin cancer in some American editions, with only a year or a year to 6 months to live. 3 months after the coup, he posts the remainder of his earnings to the surviving family members of his fallen teammates, and also sends a manuscript, presumably outlining the entire plan, to a journalist in London, presumably the aforementioned freelance writer that I have already mentioned earlier. Lastly, Shannon walks into the African bush whistling a favorite tune, a Spanish harlow, to end his life on his own terms, with a gun in his hand, blood in his mouth, and a bullet in his chest. Although each work of Forsyth stands individually, there are certain similarities which may be described as his stylist formula for success. There is always an efficient hero who is at the odds with the establishment. A historical backdrop frequently places the hero in contact with known public figures in known historical situations. Intricate detail is offered, lending authenticity to the work, and ingenious plots which resemble large jigsaw puzzles of seemingly disconnected actions or events are developed. Other writers use one or more parts of the formula, but it is these four facets that, when used collectively, distinguish Forsyth work. My take, 8 out of 10. Goodbye and see you soon.